Elliot Sanders stood frozen in his dimly lit living room. The weight of his phone pressed against his ear felt insignificant compared to the suffocating pressure in his chest. The words tumbled out of his mouth unbidden, each syllable heavier than the last. "There's a stolen child in my house," he whispered, his voice cracking. "Please, I need help." He dropped the phone onto the table, his hand trembling. His gaze drifted to the bassinet near the window, where Lily, his daughter, slept peacefully, unaware of the chaos about to erupt around her. Natalie, his wife, stood near the doorway, her face pale and her eyes wide with fear. She clung to the doorframe for support, as if the ground beneath her feet might give way. "You have to tell them the truth," Elliot said, his voice low but steady. Natalie shook her head frantically. "No, Elliot, we can't. Please, there's another way. We can fix this." But it was too late. The faint wail of sirens in the distance grew louder, each passing second pulling them closer to their reckoning. Elliot Sanders was an unassuming man in his early 30s, with dark hair that always seemed slightly tousled. His deep-set brown eyes, usually calm and thoughtful, now betrayed a storm brewing within. A systems analyst by trade, Elliot was logical and methodical, a man who thrived on structure. Becoming a father to Lily had added color to his once gray world, filling it with joy and purpose. That afternoon, sunlight streamed through the trees as Elliot pushed Lily's stroller along the park's winding path. She was bundled in a soft yellow blanket, her tiny hand peeking out. But then, the peace shattered. A woman stepped into his path, a stranger. She was thin, almost gaunt, with unkempt hair spilling around her face in wild, coppery waves. Her clothes hung loosely on her small frame, and her pale blue eyes burned with desperation. "Beautiful baby," she said softly, her voice trembling. "Thank you," Elliot replied cautiously, stepping slightly in front of the stroller. The woman's gaze never left Lily. Her lips quivered as if she wanted to say more. Finally she spoke, her voice cracking. "Her name is Emily." Elliot froze. The words landed like a blow, leaving him momentarily speechless. "I'm sorry, what?" "She's mine," the woman said, her voice rising. "You took her from me?" Panic surged in Elliot's chest. He instinctively pulled the stroller back. "I think you've mistaken." Before he could finish, the woman stumbled back, clutching her coat tightly around her. Her anguished face etched itself into Elliot's memory as she fled down the path. Elliot stood frozen, his mind racing. Who was she, and why had her words unsettled him so deeply? That night, Elliot lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling. The woman's voice echoed in his mind. "Her name is Emily." Beside him, Natalie stirred. She was a striking woman, with shoulder-length dark hair that framed her face like a picture. Her green eyes, usually bright and confident, now carried a hint of wariness. "Why are you still awake?" she murmured, propping herself up on one elbow. "Something happened today," Elliot replied, his voice quiet. He recounted the encounter at the park, watching Natalie's reaction closely. At first, she laughed nervously. "People say strange things, Elliot. Maybe she lost a child and—" "I don't know," thought Lily looked like her. But when he mentioned the name Emily, Natalie stiffened. Her hand faltered on the blanket. "It's a coincidence," she said, her tone sharp. A small voice inside Elliot urged him to press her further, but he let it drop. For now, Elliot had always trusted Natalie, and she had been careful to hide the truth from him. Their marriage had been built on trust, but with Elliot working away from home for months at a time, he didn't have the constant presence to notice the subtle changes in Natalie's behavior. He would only return for 2 weeks at a time, after working long stretches of 3 months straight. During those brief visits, he focused on recharging and making the most of their limited time together. Natalie claimed she was too tired or uncomfortable during his time at home, and she made sure to keep him at arm's length. She'd tell him that her doctor's visits were just routine, and she always had a reasonable excuse when Elliot suggested being more involved. When he tried to feel for a baby bump, she'd pull away or quickly change the topic. So, when the truth finally came crashing down, Elliot was left wondering how he'd missed the signs. How had he allowed the distance between them to keep him from seeing the truth? He felt the sting of regret, realizing just how much he had let his career and his trust in Natalie blind him to what was really happening. Days passed, and Elliot's mind remained tangled in the web of confusion and doubt. The encounter with Mia in the park weighed heavily on him, and the conversation with Natalie had only left him with more questions. As he lay awake night after night, the sense of betrayal gnawed at him. He needed answers, answers that Natalie wasn't giving him. Despite everything, he still couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the story. It had been a week since the park incident, and Elliot knew he couldn't keep living in the dark. The guilt of not having questioned Natalie sooner weighed on him, and his need for the truth was now overpowering. He couldn't let it go any longer. His mind drifted to Martha, Natalie's younger sister. Over the years, Martha had always been distant, but he knew she had witnessed many things that would shed light on the situation. She had often been a quiet observer of the family dynamics, but he had never expected her to be a source of help. Yet, in this moment, he felt a strange urgency to speak with her. Perhaps she knew more than she had ever let on. It had been nearly a month since the park incident, and in that time, Elliot's world had only become more fragmented. He felt disconnected from Natalie, from the life he thought they were building. It was time to confront the truth. After much hesitation, Elliot finally called Martha. He didn't expect her to be forthcoming, but the weight of his curiosity and his need for clarity compelled him. The phone rang once, then twice before Martha answered. "Hello?" Her voice was hesitant, as if she'd been caught off guard. "Martha," Elliot said, his voice steady but urgent, "I need to talk to you. It's about Natalie." There was a long pause before Martha replied. "What about her? I know you've been around more than you let on. I need to know everything you know, about her pregnancy, about Lily." Elliot's voice faltered only slightly, but the gravity of the words was unmistakable. Martha sighed deeply on the other end of the line. "I didn't want to get involved, Elliot, but I can't watch you go through this anymore." They arranged to meet at a small cafe on the edge of town the following day. Elliot barely slept that night, the anticipation gnawing at him. He needed the truth, and Martha, no matter how reluctant, was the key to unlocking it. The next day, as he sat at a table waiting for Martha to arrive, his thoughts were consumed by what she might reveal. He had always known there was something off about the way things had unfolded, but he had never imagined that the life he thought he knew was built on such a fragile foundation of lies. When Martha walked through the door, her face was drawn with a mixture of fear and resolve. She sat down across from him, avoiding his gaze for a moment before meeting his eyes. "Elliot, I don't know where to begin," she said quietly, her voice tinged with sadness. "But I'll tell you everything. I'm sorry you had to find out this way, but the truth, it has to come out." Martha, Natalie's younger sister, shifted uneasily, his eyes darting around the room as if looking for an escape. "Mr. Sanders, I don't want to get involved," he said, his voice low. "You're already involved." Elliot pressed, his tone sharp. "I need to know what happened." Martha sighed, his shoulders slumping in resignation. "About 7 months before Lily was born, Mrs. Sanders told me she was pregnant. At first, I believed her. She was glowing, excited, and talked about baby names and nursery colors. But then, things didn't add up." Elliot frowned, his stomach nodding. "What do you mean?" Martha hesitated. "She started wearing a silicone baby bump, a convincing one. She made sure to wear it when she went out shopping or to work. Sometimes, she'd take photos of herself in maternity clothes, posing with her hand on her stomach. She even posted them online to make it seem real." Elliot's breath caught. "How did she hide this from me?" "She planned everything carefully. You were always working long hours, so she avoided wearing the bump at home. If you touched her stomach, she'd tell you she felt sensitive and didn't want anyone near it." Elliot felt his world spinning. "And the doctor appointments?" "She only went to private clinics," Martha admitted. "Your mother-in-law arranged everything. They hired someone to pose as her OB/GYN. That night, Elliot confronted Natalie in their bedroom. She sat on the edge of the bed, her eyes red and swollen from crying. "You faked your pregnancy," he said, his voice trembling. "You lied to me, to everyone." Natalie let out a broken sob. "I didn't know what else to do. After all the failed treatments, I felt like my body was betraying me. I wanted to give you a family, Elliot, a real family." "You used a fake baby bump? You took photos, staged everything?" Natalie buried her face in her hands. It was Mom's idea. She said no one would question me if I made it convincing enough. I wore the bump everywhere. Work, stores, even family events. I thought it would only be for a little while, just until Lily was here. Mia Harper sat on a weathered park bench, clutching a worn photograph of a newborn. Her once vibrant coppery hair hung limp around her face, and her pale blue eyes were rimmed with exhaustion. She looked up as Elliot approached, her body stiffening. "Please," she said, her voice trembling. "I don't want any trouble. I just want my baby back." Elliot crouched beside her, his voice soft. "Mia, I need to know the truth." Mia hesitated, her gaze darting to the stroller where Emily sat cooing softly. "She's my daughter," Mia whispered. "I trusted Evelyn. She told me she could help me, that she'd find Emily a good home if I wasn't ready. But when I gave birth, they told me she died. They lied to me." Tears streamed down Mia's face as she continued. "I saw her. I heard her cry. And then they took her away. I didn't know where she went until I saw her with you." Elliot's chest tightened. Mia's pain was undeniable, her story aligning with the puzzle pieces he had been gathering. That night, Elliot confronted Natalie once again. Her tears had dried, but the weight of her guilt hung heavily in the air. "I met Mia today," Elliot said. "She told me everything. You lied to her. You stole her baby." Natalie's hands trembled. "It wasn't supposed to be like this," she whispered. "Mom said Mia couldn't take care of her, that it was better for everyone if we took her in. She said it was a blessing, Elliot. A gift." "A gift?" Elliot's voice rose, anger flaring in his chest. "You took her baby, Natalie. You pretended to be pregnant for months. And for what? To live a lie?" Natalie sank to her knees, sobbing. "I thought it would fix everything. I thought it would make us whole." Elliot shook his head, his heart breaking. "You didn't just lie to Mia. You lied to me, to yourself, and now we have to make it right." The next day, Elliot confronted Evelyn in her spacious living room. The older woman was impeccably dressed, her sharp features framed by a perfectly coiffed silver bob. She sat on the couch, her legs crossed, exuding an air of unshakable confidence. "You're here about Natalie, aren't you?" Evelyn said smoothly, sipping her tea. Elliot's jaw tightened. "I'm here about Mia, about the baby you stole from her." Evelyn smirked, unbothered. "Stole? That girl couldn't take care of a goldfish, let alone a child. I did what needed to be done." "You manipulated her," Elliot hissed. "You told her the baby died. You destroyed her life." Evelyn shrugged. "And gave you and Natalie a chance at happiness. You should be thanking me." Elliot's fists clenched at his sides. "You built this family on lies, and now it's over." Evelyn raised an eyebrow. "No one has to know, Elliot. You could let this go and keep your family intact." But Elliot had already made up his mind. "I've already called the police," he said, his voice firm. For the first time, Evelyn's mask of composure cracked. The fallout was swift. The police arrested Evelyn on charges of child trafficking, and Natalie was placed under investigation for her role in the scheme. The truth about Emily, was laid bare. Elliot had never imagined this would be his life. But now, standing at the crossroads of guilt and redemption, he had no choice but to move forward. The day Mia was reunited with her daughter was bittersweet. As she held Emily in her arms, tears streaming down her face, Elliot felt a sharp pang of loss. He had loved Lily as his own, but now he had to let her go. His heart ached for the child he had raised, but as he looked at Mia holding Emily, the depth of the pain was slowly replaced by a sense of rightness. He had done the right thing. "I want you to be part of her life," Mia said softly. "She loves you, and I think she needs you." Elliot nodded, tears blurring his vision. "I love her too, more than anything." Months later, Elliot stood in the yard of Mia's new home, watching as Emily, now a bright and cheerful toddler, played with a ball. Mia had found stable work and created a safe, loving environment for her daughter. The sunlight bathed the scene in golden warmth, a sign of the new beginnings for both Mia and Emily. As Emily ran up to Elliot, giggling, he scooped her into his arms. "You're getting so big," he said, his voice filled with warmth, a stark contrast to the anger and confusion he once felt. Mia approached, a soft smile on her face. "She's happy, Elliot, and I'm grateful for everything you've done." Elliot looked at her, feeling a sense of peace. He had lost the family he thought he wanted, but he had found something even more meaningful. A chance to stand for truth and to be a part of Emily's life in a way that truly mattered. As the sun set, casting a warm glow over the yard, Elliot realized that love wasn't about biology or possession. It was about doing what was right, no matter the cost. This story is a powerful reminder that lies, no matter how well-intentioned, cannot build a solid foundation for happiness. The truth may be painful and challenging, but it is the only thing that can set us free. Elliot's journey demonstrates that love is not about possession or blood. It's about integrity, doing what is right, and standing up for the truth, even when the cost is high. Ultimately, the bonds that matter most are those of trust, compassion, and courage. If you found this story thought-provoking, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Family, truth, and redemption are themes that resonate deeply with all of us. Let's spread the message that honesty and love always lead to a brighter future. Have you ever been faced with a difficult truth? How would you have reacted in Elliot's shoes? Leave a comment below and share your thoughts. We'd love to hear your perspective.